I be correct that it is exactly 3 o'clock?
Yeah.
Perfect. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for honoring this invitation to this press briefing. My name is Kusela Sangweni. I'm the National Communications Manager. With me is Comrade Jeff Radebe, who is the ANC Head of Policy, deployed as the Minister of Monitoring and Evaluation in the Presidency. Comrade Jeff is going to present to us a report that was presented in the plenary around the implementation of the National Development Plan. You will remember that the African National Congress adopted, the ANC adopted the National Development Plan at the Mangaung Conference, and it is our blueprint towards 2030. So as we sit and we discuss issues of policy, it is important that we reflect on the progress made thus far and how the ANC continues to improve the lives of our people. So Comrade Jeff is going to deliver the statement. You will get a copy, which I'm sure will be coming in any minute now. And without wasting any time, let me invite you, Comrade Jeff. Thank you.
Thanks, Kusela and people of the media. I'll read the statement, then I'll answer questions at the end. But bear in mind that this is not a comprehensive statement because the issue of the implementation of the National Development Plan is a very long presentation. So I'll just make a broad summary. The ANC meets here on this occasion of the 5th Policy Conference under the theme, the year of O.R. Tambo, let us deepen unity. In the previous conference of the ANC, we adopted the National Development Plan as a platform for united action by all South Africans to eradicate poverty, create full employment, and reduce inequality as critical building blocks towards a truly united, non-racial, non-sexist, democratic, and prosperous society. Yesterday, we presented a comprehensive overview of the progress that we are making in the implementation of the National Development Plan. It constitutes, that is, the National Development Plan, the program through which we advance radical socio-economic transformation. We made proposal for the consideration of the commissions that will be starting on Monday as we discuss the various policy areas. On social transformation, the health of South African children has improved, with mortality amongst children under the age of 5 years has dropped from 40 deaths per 1,000 live births in 2014 to 37 deaths per 1,000 live births in 2015. We also noted the decline in birth rates and the resultant low population trajectory. This shows positive impacts of our successful government programs. The matriculation pass rate has risen from 58% in 1994 to 72.5% in 2016. We are also on a positive trajectory, as can be seen by the international comparisons through the South and Eastern African Consortium of Monitoring and Educational Quality and the trends in international mathematics and science. Over 226,000 TVET college students are receiving NSFAS funding during the 2016 academic year, with over 255,000 university students. The NSFAS budget has increased rapidly in the past years, funding more and more of our students. However, student protests show that the funding is inadequate and has led to instability of this sector. Our government has also committed to reopening colleges of education. 13.2 million of the 16.7 million households, that is about 79% in our society, are now living in formal housing. However, rapid urbanization and migration still result in informal housing continuing. Despite significant pro-poor investments in social infrastructure, poverty is now driven by poor educational attainment as well as unemployment. This progress with social and economic infrastructure may be placed at risk by lack of proper maintenance, a point I'll come to later. The number of those employed are increasing, but not fast enough to cater for the multitudes, especially of our young people that have entered the age of the workforce. Women are also taking their rightful place in the workforce, increasingly freeing them from the historical constraints of the triple yoke of oppression. We are recommending to the various commissions the following: universal access to quality early childhood development services for at least 4 years, and the reduction of the proportion of young people who are not in employment nor in education or drop out without any educational qualification. Universal access to ICT in school to support learning. Full implementation of the National Health Insurance White Paper that Minister Motsoaledi released a few days ago. Expand community worker, health worker program with a target of 700,000 community health workers by 2030. Overcoming apartheid geography and densifying suburban areas to create integrated human settlements. On economic transformation, we continue especially to grow our tourism sector, where direct and indirect contribution to GDP has increased from 372 billion rand in 2014 to 375 billion rand in 2015. In the manufacturing sector, we continue to use the Industrial Policy Action Plan, the IPAP, to drive industrialization as well as the Black Industrialist Program. On energy, the Renewable Energy Program has successfully unlocked 201 billion rand of investment through the Renewable Independent Power Producer Program. We have, in that regard, procured 6,244 megawatts of renewable energy, with 3,175 megawatts already being supplied to our grid. On transport, investment in multi-purpose pipelines that transport liquids from inland to coastal areas has been completed. Our government has also completed the heavy haul rail corridor that will fast-track the movement of coal from the coal fields to the export port of Richards Bay. Our government, as we know, has implemented the procurement of 1,064 new locomotives with significant localization identified. And all the metros in our country have started the implementation of the first phase of the Bus Rapid program. On water, the Mokolo and Crocodile Water Augmentation Project, Phase 1 project, has been completed, delivering more than 30 million cubic meters per annum of water to the Waterberg area. Water demand has been reduced from large water supply system by 19% from a baseline of 10% in 2014. Rehabilitation of wetlands to sustain our ecosystem across the country has significantly improved. To date, 394 wetlands have been rehabilitated out of 695 that are part of our targets of the first year of the first phase of our implementation of the NDP. Compliance with water use license conditions by mines has also significantly improved, sitting at 56% compared to 20% in 2014. The target is 60% improvement by 2019. Turnaround times in relation to licensing of development activities has also improved. On ICT, digital migration infrastructure projects is 95% complete, which will ensure 85% digital coverage in the country shortly. The e-learning school ICT connectivity program has reached 1,525 district schools and 125 Dinaledi schools were connected and using e-learning services through public-private partnerships. Some of the things that we are suggesting as part of the interventions going forward to drive the fourth industrial revolution while mitigating possible negative impacts and effects, promoting increased competition in the sector, reducing the cost to ICT, and particularly increasing access to township and rural communities. Urgently to improve governance and delivery and alignment of state-owned companies and DFIs to support the implementation of the NDP. On EPWP, expand the employment through the EPWP sector, which at the same time to ensure that 22 key services of vulnerable South Africans are catered for. Increasing as well access to post-school education and training through the open, online, and flexible learning. On Operation Phakisa, as you know, we've got about 6 labs that have been successful: Oceans Economy, the scaling up of the Ideal Clinic, ICT in education, the Mining Lab, the Agriculture, Rural Development, and Land Reform Lab. On the issue of the Oceans Economy, just to highlight one point, is that a total of about 7.3 billion rand worth of investment by government and the private sector has unlocked the port infrastructure, boat building, and aquaculture, creating about 6,900 jobs. On legislature and governance, the Polokwane conference made some of the recommendation on how to deal with this system, especially of planning. Substantial progress has been made in establishing South Africa's planning system. A comprehensive institutional framework for planning to drive the development agenda towards this goal is in progress as we speak. The issue of services to our people through the public service is continuing, with many initiatives to fight corruption within the public service, with the banning of doing business by government, by a civil servant having been banned. On the issue of local government, some of the proposal that is being coming forward is that we need to resolve the constraints to improve access to basic services to our people by strengthening the oversight of our water services authorities and electricity distributors to ensure that they operate efficiently and provide sustainable and affordable services. On peace and stability, we have noted progress and some of the challenges in this sector of our society and of fighting corruption, that since 2014 as to March 2017, there's an increase in the number of convictions of people who have been found guilty on priority corruption cases, from 52 to 110 people with assets to the value of 5 billion rand having been frozen through the courts of our laws. On the issue of crime prevention as well, that we're going to be continuing with crime prevention and also ensuring that we collaborate with all stakeholders of South African society in developing an anti-corruption strategy whose document has been unveiled about 2 months ago. As I conclude, we need to emphasize that the point that has been made, that the National Development Plan is our roadmap towards socio-economic transformation of South African society. We have outlined some of the achievements in the conference, as well as areas that we need to transform the lives of people. We also committing ourselves in this conference to redouble our efforts to address challenges and also improving the quality of service. Government is committed to transforming critical service delivery areas of our country, and we're also going to be demonstrating that the ANC is the party that will make the difference that our citizens demand, and will continue to ensure that we move to eradicate poverty, inequality, and unemployment.
Thank you, Comrade Jeff. May I please request that we just pass around the copies of the statement, which I saw them come in. Ladies and gentlemen, as I'm sure you will appreciate, and from what Comrade Jeff has said, this is but a summary of the work that the ANC-led government has been involved in. But I just want to also highlight the point that the NDP is a roadmap towards 2030. We are not yet at 2030. I know all of you are very knowledgeable and familiar with the document, so as you engage, let's keep those timelines in mind. I also just want to thank you and encourage even the Sunday papers that if you could continue reporting on the substantive issues of conference, the policies which we are here for. I'm going to take a round of questions. I will take 5 questions in the first round and come back for another round. Number 1, number 2, number 3, but number 4 there. Okay, you look like Comrade John Jeffrey. Apologies, and you are number 5, sir.
Good afternoon, I'm Mogelang Bata from Bloomberg News. Minister, just wanted to ask, the Finance Minister yesterday mentioned that the Treasury, together with other portfolios within the economic cluster, met with the President sometime during the past week to talk about the economic crisis that South Africa is currently in. And they came up with a 13-point plan, which they plan to unveil over the next few days. Was that plan unveiled to the plenary? Was it discussed or debated on in terms of the points that were listed there? And then in terms of the stuff that you presented and discussed on the NDP implementation, was there any forward-looking engagement in terms of anything that, we know there's the 9-point plan, was any of that kind of, was there any forward-looking discussion on how better to implement the NDP and to reach the targets given the context of slow growth and high unemployment?
Good afternoon, and thank you for taking my question. It's Bonola from the New Age. Minister, the NDP has been criticized by both the ANC's alliance partners, COSATU, as well as the SACP. Both of your alliance partners, or the ANC's alliance partners, have said that general liberal undertones find expression in the NDP. And since both the ANC's alliance partners were present or participated in some of the discussions this morning, how did that debate rather pan out? And then secondly, in terms of the job targets that are contained in the NDP plan, seeing now that the economy is in a technical recession, how do you plan to navigate around this particular situation? Are the targets rather contained in the report still realistic at this point in time? Thank you.
Salbodan, Steven Siakwe from Mapepeza Community Newspaper. My question to you, sir, is how is the ANC ensuring that the 400-page actual NDP is to be distributed to communities and to the people, particularly in people using their own languages other than English, because we have read the comprehensive document itself and we have challenges where people are finding it hard to interpret government progress and aligning it to the NDP. So how is the ANC strategizing and coming up with tactics to inform people better and even stronger on the NDP? Thanks.
Can I go? Thank you. My name is Tsepo Ikanem from the SABC. On the issue of access to education, business has been very much critical in terms of criticizing the pass mark for matric to say that we have set the bar too low in terms of matching up with the standards of the outcomes that we need to find out, especially after post-education matriculants. Is this issue likely to be raised in view of the fact that there's a lot of mismatch in terms of the skills that are needed by the industry with regard to vis-a-vis the churning out of graduates who we know that really most of them cannot be get jobs basically after graduating? And lastly, on the ICT universal access, you've pointed out to the statistics about the rollout of the infrastructure itself, but the issue of digital migration to make sure that there are dividends from that digital migration is still a sore point. Are there any kind of set timelines that we'll be seeing emanating from discussion during the policy conference going forward? Thanks, sir.
I've had one withdrawal, so can take one question, one other question in this round. Do we have a hand? Yes, Susan?
Thank you very much. Susan Boyson from WITS. Just a question. Was there any discussion or contestation amongst delegates of the fact that the NDP is being projected as the conduit for radical economic transformation? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the questions. The first one, that meeting with the President to deal with those economic matters, the finality is still to come. So when that is arrived at, it will be incorporated into the discussions both of the ruling party, but more particularly of government as we're moving towards the cabinet, the Khutla, in about a month's time. So the details of that will come in due course. On the issue of the NDP 9-point plan, let me just emphasize this point, that the National Development Plan has been adopted not only by government, but also by the governing party at the last conference of the ANC in Mangaung. Also, it has been adopted by the Parliament of South Africa, which means the majority of South Africa's people have embraced the National Development Plan. That is why it is our plan as the governing party which we are currently implementing. In 2014, to implement the National Development Plan, we adopted the first 5-year program of the NDP, which we call a medium-term strategic framework 2014 to 2019. And this has 14 outcomes which are equivalent to what the NDP has called for. So in this mid-term report that we're giving the summary of today, we're indicating how far we've gone in each of the 14 outcomes, starting with basic education, health, issues of the economy, human settlement, social cohesion, nation building, environmental issues. Of course, even though we're very enthusiastic as the ANC about the NDP, but some of our alliance partners, especially COSATU, has some reservation, especially on the economic section of the National Development Plan. I can't speak for them, but my perception is that they have not rejected the National Development Plan. SACP, I cannot speak on behalf of the SACP, but it's common cause that the GS, General Secretary of the SACP, is a member of cabinet, so top officials of the SACP, which, according to what I've just demonstrated to you, are implementing the National Development Plan in terms of the medium-term strategic framework. In terms of the targets, of course, we do not live in isolation. There are conditions that are beyond our control, especially on the economy with the global economic downturn and also our own subjective situation in South Africa that has given rise to this negative economic growth currently. But we are committed of ensuring that we attain our objectives of the NDP. But remember as well that the NDP is not just a plan of government. It is a plan for the people of South Africa. So our social partners also have a responsibility and duty to come to the party as collaborators in ensuring that we can deal with the scourge of unemployment, poverty, and inequality. For an example, The private sector has also a very big responsibility in the implementation of the NDP, in that about 75% of the economy is in private hands. So the responsibility of creating jobs also lies in their shoulders. On the issue of communities as well, they're a very important partner in our journey towards our Vision 2030. So we have also summarized this more than 400 pages document into a summary, and we also attempt to translate it into various languages. That is why we are also of the firm view that the role of citizen, that's why we call it active citizenry, is of critical importance in understanding the NDP so that they can know what the role that they can play. Members of the National Planning Commissions have been going into communities in order to discuss with them directly in Cape Town, in Limpopo, and Northwest, to mention but a few. On the issue of access to education and the issue of skills, yes, it is a challenge. We also acknowledge that we still face many challenges despite the phenomenal successes that the ANC government has made in terms of a basic education in South Africa. Especially post-school education is still a challenge for us. That is why we are calling for more collaboration between the Department of Basic Education and Education and Higher Education and Training and departments as a whole with the private sector, so that we can be able to resolve this challenge that SABC is crying about, where we find that we send our young people to TVET colleges, but when they come back, they cannot be able to find work because they have not acquired the skills that is needed by the industry. So that's why even on the issue of curriculum design, there has to be a collaboration between basic education, higher education, and training with the industry so that we know that we are training people for the field of work. On digital migration, the Minister of Communication is very committed in ensuring that she accelerates this digital migration, as I've indicated. But I'm sure in due course, he'll be outlining the timelines of ensuring that we can be able to close that gap. The NDP, as I've said, it is that program of driving the socio-economic transformation of South African society. So, Professor Suzanne, that's what is being said in this policy conference. So, in all these policy documents, I'm sure you will see when the commissions begin. They've just begun this afternoon until the 5th of July. So we're very confident that the theme of radical socio-economic transformation is very dear to the hearts and minds of these delegates, as I've seen some of their draft reports from the provinces.
Thank you. Number one, sir. Alden will be number 2, number 3, number 4, and number 5. See another hand there. I'll take the 6th hand. In that order, please.
Should I go ahead?
Yes, please.
Okay. It's Aldrin Simpier from SABC TV News. On the question about ensuring that we increase access to basic services, including water, does this then not fly in the face of what's in the social transformation document, where a suggestion is made that 15% of the municipal infrastructure grant should be going to infrastructure on sports instead of basic services such as water and sanitation? How do you then balance those two things out when you have 15% that will be going to sports and recreation? And I see that in the transformation document they argue that this money that will be going to this infrastructure, the sports infrastructure, should not be seen as a luxury demand. At the center of the NDP is creating a capable state, which would ensure that the goals of the NDP are met. Is South Africa really a capable state as it stands at the moment? If, for instance, the performance agreements that the ministers sign with the president are not made public, how do we know whether the ministers are meeting those demands that are set out by the president? And the final question is, it's on the failures of ministers as well. The NDP says that there should be mud structure schools should be eradicated by last year already. That hasn't happened. The Minister for Basic Education hasn't been brought to book or taken to task with regards to that. If there are no repercussions when targets are set out in the NDP, who should then be held liable? And do we really think that those targets will be implemented if the ministers and those who have been appointed to ensure that they are being met fail to meet those targets?
Sorry, can I check, is there a microphone on this side? Do you have a microphone?
Thank you, ma'am.
Sorry.
My name is Given.
Sorry. That gentleman was actually the first person. Can we just get the microphone to him? And then we'll work in the order where it comes.
Thank you. It's Govan Whittles from the Mail and Guardian. Sorry, Given, bro. Yeah. Okay, Minister. So the National Development Plan has already been adopted by everyone that you've said. So could you please explain the purpose of the presentation to the policy conference? Are delegates at all going to be discussing the contents of the National Development Plan and to change those contents, or are they basically just going to come up with new ways to achieve the targets in the NDP? Secondly, some of the sharpest criticism against the NDP is the fact that the social partners that are involved in the NDP are not bound together by legal contract. It's more of a social pact. I think the SACP was calling for punitive mechanisms to be introduced in the NDP for people who do not strive to reach those targets or do not make any effort to reach those targets, particularly the private sector. So has there been anything done to address the criticism from your alliance partners of the NDP, which already exists? And then thirdly, could you clarify radical economic transformation and how it fits into the NDP? Just give us a more elaborate response in terms of whether they're two different things or how they complement each other or why they followed each other. Thank you.
Number 3.
Thank you, ma'am. My name is Given from Politiki. President, on his opening remarks, emphasized youth frustration as they face a snail pace of economic transformation and access to jobs. Was there any discussion on youth economics or on youth economic transformation apart from NEFSAS?
Behind you, sir.
Can you speak to the mic? You switch it off to yourself.
Someone switched it off along the way. The President mentioned the issues of the delegates having to deal with issues specifically and not drawing general and broad strokes. Let's talk about the issue of SMMEs, Minister, because there is a concession from the NDP that by 2030, to attain 11 million jobs, you would need to have 8 million active SMMEs. Having said that, I didn't hear you mentioning anything about that. And these numbers are very staggering, meaning that a lot of jobs to be achieved depend extremely on the survival and the strength of SMMEs. And I haven't heard you mentioning any of those to address unemployment in South Africa. Have the delegates and has the conference looked into the issue of capacitating SMMEs sufficiently, especially on the issue of startup funding? Because a lot of SMMEs depend on funding. However, government structures are operating as banks when approached by SMMEs as well. So how are you dealing with that issue of capacitating SMMEs in order to get to 11 million jobs? Thanks.
So just behind you, there was a hand there.
Thank you. My name is Shaba from Hillbrow Radio. Minister, this one is dedicated to you and direct to you. 105 of ANC, male domination, ruling the party. Is it a scare part of having a woman to take over from male as president of the party?
Thank you. Number 6 is over there.
Minister Sme Development from the University of Pretoria. Just a point about the targets and the objectives of the NDP. To what extent in the commissions will there be discussions about revising some of the targets to meet the current conditions? For example, one of the objectives in the NDP is that the unemployment rate should fall from 24.9% in June 2012 to 14% by 2020. What we know is that what's happened between 2012 and the present is that the unemployment rate has actually risen to 27%. The same with the target to have public employment programs that reach 1 million people by 2015 and then 2 million people by 2030. What we know also is that that target hasn't been achieved. And then there was my other colleague who was mentioning the one about the infrastructure backlog that was supposed to be met by 2016, and we know that there are still mad schools. So to what extent will the conversations that come out of the commissions today be about revising some of these targets and working out different plans to achieve the new targets by 2030?
Thank you. Colleagues, before Comrade Jeff answers, can I just put you at ease to say that every commission, once it finishes its report, so the various sectoral detailed issues that you're speaking to, we will make sure that they do come back and brief you. So Comrade Jeff is speaking to the broad strokes around the NDP, which I know that he'll do very capably. But just rest assured, you'll have an opportunity to interrogate some of the detailed issues that you want to raise. I'm not sure also if I should put him on the spot for him to take question number 5. The NDP doesn't speak about a female president, so I would like us to park that question for now. Thank you, Comrade Jeff.
The first question, 15% municipal infrastructure grant already. It is our policy to have about 10% of AMG to be dedicated to sport. So sport is not a swear word, Mr. Gentleman there. Sport can play a very key role in social cohesion and nation building. In any event, sport is very good for young people so that they should be away from drugs and other criminal activities. So we need to support sport and recreation. That is why there is a department and the minister that is responsible for sport and recreation. I'm sure some of you, when you get back to their homes, especially on weekends, you enjoy watching sport, whether it's football, rugby, cricket, and so on. So we should be able to encourage that we have these sporting facilities in our communities, especially some of us who come from the townships. In fact, it's very sad sometimes to see that our fields, sometimes called soccer fields, are not that so that we have to invest in sports in order to ensure that we can be able to grow this nation. We aspire to be a developmental state, to be capable so that we are technically competent to deliver services to our people. It is true that the President has signed performance agreement with all ministers in terms of individual ministers, but also with ministers that are responsible for each of the 14 outcomes of the National Development Plan as indicated in the medium-term strategic framework. Even though those performance agreements are not made public, but the performance of government departments in all the 14 outcomes are being made public, because every 4th quarter, the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation does an assessment of the performance of government, how far we move in implementing the NDP, and we post these reports as a program of action in our governmental website. So if you check the DPME website, you will find those reports. Part of the reforms that we are bringing forward as we're preparing the midterm review of the National Development Plan and the MTSF is to ensure accountability for performance by government departments. We're also proposing as well the creation of a law that will establish the National Planning Commission and the whole of the planning system in South Africa, with the issue of consequent management as well, to hold both executive authorities and heads of departments and officials accountable to perform in delivering the services to our people. On the issue of the NDP and the alliance partners, in the first question, I answered the question, so there's nothing that I want to add there, except to say that as I've highlighted that this is supposed to be a partnership with all social partners. And from time to time, there are meetings between government, the private sector, labor, and organs of civil society, and also the president himself has many working groups with business, even specific initiatives like the CEO's initiatives, in order to ensure that all of us must have our hands on deck in driving the National Development Plan. On the issue of a discussion on economic transformation, it is part of the commissions that's going to be discussed from Monday until Wednesday, not only economic transformation, but all the policy areas, social transformation, peace and stability, communications and the backlog of ideas, and international relations in this conference. Even though I have not said it, but in our report, we deal a lot about small and medium enterprises in the economy, and also the fight to ensure that the anti-competitive behavior and market concentration has to be dealt with by competitions authorities. Our commitment to SMME development is highlighted by the fact that in 2014, the President established a new Department of Small Business Development and a new minister responsible for small business development. There are initiatives of ensuring that there is dedicated capacity in order to promote small and medium enterprises in the economy, as well as funding. That's why the reform of some of the state-owned companies as well as development finance institutions is aimed at ensuring that we promote small and medium enterprises. On the issue of targets, I've already indicated that in the commissions, we are going to be discussing in the various commissions, starting from economic transformation to communications and the backlog of ideas. But our journey to 2030 goes ahead, and we are committed to fulfilling those objectives that are attained in that. If there are obstacles in the way, our responsibility and duty is to find ways of how to mitigate other negative consequences that stand in the way for our march to 2030.
Just the issue on youth, beyond NEFSAS, is there anything just on youth, where they were saying beyond NEFSAS, where the President spoke about the frustration of young people, that we looked at it beyond just the issue of NEFSAS and education funding?
Well, on the issue of young people and also the challenges of young people, there is a new board that has been appointed on the National Youth Development Agency, that they are reorganizing themselves in order to ensure that they give more impetus as well as a new fillip to the National Youth Development Agency in order to attend to the challenges that young people are facing. I'm not at liberty to indicate what the thinking is, but I'm sure the chairperson of the board at the good time will be able to outline some of the program of action that they want to take as a matter of agency in order to deal with this issue of youth in our society.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. We've come to the end of this briefing. Tomorrow morning there is a business briefing that will be addressed by Comrade Lindiwe Zulu, focusing on small business development at 7:30 in the hall. Any other changes to the program, the briefings on strategy and tactics and organizational development, we will inform you as and when those reports are concluded. Thank you very much. That will only be tomorrow. We won't have another briefing today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.